In this video, I want to talk to you about a philosophy that has fascinated me for a very long time now, and that would be Stoicism. Stoicism is something that I see as a means to achieve inner peace and tranquility, and it's something that I definitely aspire to. But my experience has been that it's a lot easier said than done. If there was just one thing I could change about myself, it would absolutely be my tendency to overthink things. For as long as I can remember, I've been a terrible ruminator, and it is by far the one thing that has caused me the most stress and the most upset in my life. I can remember times as far back as kindergarten where I would stress myself out so badly about certain things that I would make myself physically sick. I would lose sleep, I'd give myself stomach cramps, and it almost sounds funny to imagine a 5-year-old being so worried about things. What could a 5-year-old possibly be so worried about that they're that stressed?
Lousy traumatic childhood.
And I guess it's little people, little problems, big people, big problems. I guess everything is proportionate in life. But I remember being that young and telling my mom that I, quote, felt to cry, which was my way of saying that I just had this pit in my stomach and I didn't know why. And it would take me about 20 years from that point to recognize that that feeling was anxiety. Anxiety comes in many different forms. There's social anxiety, there's generalized anxiety, there's anxiety just about very specific situations. And I would say to some degree that I struggle with all three of those things, but the one that has been the most problematic for me consistently has been just over-stressing about very specific situations. And the thing about anxiety is that it's entirely pointless. No matter how anxious you are about a given scenario, that anxious feeling is not going to change the outcome. No matter how much stress you endure, no matter how worried you are, you don't actually have the ability to change the outcome. And if somehow you do have the ability to change the outcome, your stress still isn't a factor in it. Anxiety is your body's fight or flight response. It's your subconscious detecting some level of danger. And from an evolutionary standpoint, I can certainly see how at different points in history it may have been a necessity, but anxiety does very little to combat modern day stressors. From my perspective, Stoicism is the complete opposite of anxiety. It's the practice of letting go, letting be, and just being okay with whatever is. And to me, it sounds like a superpower. It's the complete opposite of how my brain tends to work by default, but it's something that I'm definitely striving for. From a purely logical perspective, it makes total sense to acknowledge your lack of power in a given situation and to find comfort in knowing that there's no point in stressing about something you can't change. But in practice, it's much more difficult. Humans are highly emotional creatures, and so what's most practical or most logical isn't always what's natural. Being a stoic doesn't mean being aloof or uncaring or disinterested. It just means being able to accept that which you can't change, and most importantly, being able to relinquish the desire to want to change those things. I've always seen my life as just a series of hurdles to jump over. I do this thing called wishing life away, and I promise it's not as morbid as it sounds, but it's just my brain telling me that I can finally relax once a certain task is complete, once a certain day has passed, once a certain event is over, and it's just this ongoing thing. I tend to look at all the things that stress me out in life as a checkpoint, and then I fixate on just trying to run past those checkpoints because the only thing that alleviates the anxiety is the event coming and going and being over. I know that might sound extreme, but the truth is I think everybody does it. You probably do it. You probably wake up Monday morning and think to yourself, oh my God, I only have to wake up 4 more days this week and then it's the weekend, and you're basically just wishing your week away, and that's all that I'm doing. But it's not just about Mondays for me, it's about everything, and it's exhausting. If you're already subscribed to my channel, which I certainly hope you are, you may have noticed that a couple weeks ago I missed an upload, and that's not something I do very frequently. But the truth is I had so much going on, I had so much stress on my plate all at once that week that there was just zero possibility that I was going to be able to sit down and focus and make a video. I made a video this past summer about my dog Levi and about the heart condition he was diagnosed with. And if you haven't seen that video yet, I'll link to it in the cards up here in the description box down below as well, so you can check it out. But the long and short of the story is that he's getting a little bit older and he had some loose teeth that need to be extracted. So I took him into the vet for a pre-operative appointment prior to his dentistry, and she found a heart murmur. And the heart murmur led to him being diagnosed with something called mitral valve disease, which put him at a significantly higher risk of anesthesia death and made the dentistry a lot more complicated. The problem was that even with acknowledging that risk, his teeth can't just be ignored. It still need to be dealt with. He still needed the extractions done. He was in obvious discomfort. And so under the guidance of our vet, we delayed the procedure, got him started on heart medication to help strengthen his heart and hopefully make the procedure a little safer for him. And then we rebooked it for December. As you can imagine, the entire situation was very upsetting and very stressful. I was stressed out about his teeth. I was stressed out about his heart. I was upset that he was going to have to suffer with his teeth being sore for a couple months longer. And I was just generally upset to know that my little boy is getting older and there's nothing I can do about it.
Do you know how much I love you? Do you know how much I love you? I don't even understand. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Even before learning about his heart condition, I was terribly stressed about him going under anesthesia and having the dentistry done. And I had been wishing that day away for months, just wishing it would come and go and be over and done and he would be home and I could stop thinking about it. So then having to delay it further and then having this additional level of stress and risk added to the situation was just more than I felt like I could manage. Well, his procedure was a couple weeks ago, and I won't leave you guys hanging.
Hey buddy, I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you. Oh, I love you so much. I love you so much, my little buddy. Mwah.
He's done, he's good, he's safe, he's home, it's over. And thankfully it all went smoothly, or at least as smoothly as it could given the situation. But in case his heart wasn't a big enough issue, in case the teeth weren't a big enough issue, in the weeks leading up to the procedure, I also found a little bump on his ear, and that had to be removed, and thankfully it's benign, and so that was okay too. But honestly, the entire week leading up to that point was just a total blur. I had just been wishing that day away so hard that I couldn't focus on a single thing other. And just in case Levi's procedure and all of his health issues weren't enough to completely stress me out on their own, 2 days prior to his procedure, I wound up having a COVID exposure scare, which just was the icing on the cake. It completely threw a wrench in all of my plans. I was supposed to stay over at my mom's house the night before his procedure to take him into the vet because she's much closer to the clinic than I am, and he had to be there early in the morning, and now that was off the table. I was freaking out thinking that there was a potential he could die on the operating table. I could get COVID. If I pass it to my mom, she's high risk. She could get really sick. If the worst possible thing happened and if things went poorly at the vet, I couldn't even go into the clinic if there's a possibility that I have COVID. If I get sick, I'm gonna feel terrible. I might have to miss time from work. It's gonna cost me a bunch of money. It was just piling up and I was losing it. But the thing is that regardless of how legitimate all of these concerns and these stressors are, no matter how justified I am in feeling the way that I felt, the truth is that my feelings don't change any of it. No matter how much I stressed myself out, no matter how anxious I was, I didn't have any influence on whether or not Levi's procedure would be successful. I couldn't change whether or not I was gonna catch COVID at that point. There was nothing I could do. I hoped I wouldn't, of course. But if I was going to, being stressed about it wasn't going to change that. Me ruminating, being anxious, being stressed, freaking myself out, driving myself crazy, losing sleep, making myself sick, none of those things were going to change the outcomes, and I recognized that, but I couldn't help it. So more than ever, all I felt I could do was to wish that week away, to just be so eager for Levi to come home and to be all good, for me to not get sick, for me to test negative, and ultimately everything was fine. Levi's home, he's actually so much better than he was. The problem teeth are gone, the bump on his ear was benign, it's gone, his stitches are out.
Oh, I love you. I love you so much. How's that ear looking? Looks so good. Looks so good. How are those teeth looking? We're missing a few, but that's okay.
I never got sick. I tested negative. I did both a rapid and a PCR test. Both came back negative. Everything is fine. I didn't have to lose any time from work. I didn't have to reschedule any clients. And in fact, the following week I had some time off for Christmas and New Year's, and everything was all good. And basically I stressed myself out. I made myself sick, all for nothing again. And from a logical perspective, I kind of thought this would be the outcome, to be honest with you. I did have that little voice of reason in the back of my head saying that from a probability standpoint, everything was going to be just fine. That Levi's vet was very confident in her ability to safely operate on him. He had the thumbs up from his cardiologist, that I probably wasn't going to get sick because I wasn't directly exposed to somebody who had COVID, but rather I was exposed to somebody who was exposed to somebody who had COVID. And that little voice of reason existed, but it was so easily drowned out by the louder voices that were jumping to the worst possible scenarios. Everything worked out fine as I thought it would and as I obviously hoped it would, but I couldn't stop my brain from going, what if this and what if that and what if this happens and what if that happens, all while knowing that I don't really have any control over any of it and that panicking and being stressed and anxious isn't going to change anything. And ultimately, that's what I think this all comes down to. Stoicism is the practice of being able to relinquish control. And that's something that has always been very hard for me. But I am trying my best. And honestly, isn't that all any of us can actually do? If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and hit that like button. I really appreciate you guys liking and interacting with the video. It helps me out a whole lot. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please go ahead and do so. I make videos about minimalism, personal finance, investing, self-development, and all sorts of other cool things. And let's start a discussion in the comments if we can. Tell me about a scenario where you were really, really stressed out, and if you have any tips on being able to just accept the things that you can't change, if that's something that you've ever tried to do, or how you approach it from a mindset perspective. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I will see you in the next video.